Welcome back, everyone, to Open Line. Glad you are with us. We're talking about foreign policy, President Biden's foreign policy efforts. He just concluded his summit with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin. Lots to talk about there. He also met with leaders in Europe. And we are very happy to have with us Dr. Thomas Schwartz, Vanderbilt Political Science Professor. Always great to have Dr. Schwartz with us. And let's go to the phones. We've kind of set the table for the discussion. Let's go to Ron. Hello, Ron?
Yes, sir.
Hello. Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
All right. Thank you for taking my call, first of all. Just a question and a comment. I wonder why is it? It's like the United States is the one that's always getting hacked. How come it ain't China and Russia and different countries? Well, I'm sure other countries are getting hacked, but it's like Russia and China aren't. And just a comment, I'm going to bet both of y'all $100 a piece that I'm fixing to get on my horse here in a little bit, and I'm going to take off from Tennessee, and I can beat Biden and Harris to the border. What you going to bet? Thank you for taking my call.
Okay. All right, I don't know. The hacked thing, first of all, I mean, that was one of the big issues. Are we hacking them? We certainly feel like they're hacking us all the time. I think Biden may have threatened him if he doesn't shape up. But what about the whole hacking thing?
Well, what I understand, and there's been a couple of books on this that have sort of gotten into this issue, is that cyberspace is really unregulated now in a sense. There's no real international agreements there. And that one reason the United States has not done this is because we're very good at it. We have done it with certain countries, and we've all helped other countries do it. So, for example, some of the hacks that were done to slow down the Iranian nuclear program undoubtedly originated in part with the United States and Israel working together to try and hack and make that program suffer consequences for it. Other countries, there are hacks that go on all the time. We are probably more vulnerable the more we become dependent on computer networks and internet networks that we are, and so that there is this opportunity, particularly for ransomware, and companies have been paying ransomware, of course, we discovered, so it's profitable. And the development of cryptocurrencies has also allowed it to develop because they're less likely to be traced. So, yes, actually, that's something that's probably going on from both. The thing is that Russia seems, from what our intelligence agencies are saying and from what we're observing, they seem to be allowing this much more readily than other countries. So other countries are trying to police gangsters and others who are doing this, and that Russia seems to be promoting it not just as a country, but also among it has a very talented group of citizens who can do this type of thing, and they seem to be allowing it. And that's the type of thing Biden was getting at with Putin today. But as you can see, Putin simply denied it, said, what's the evidence? This is not an easy thing to develop or expose. It's not as easy to put the evidence out there to the public and also to put it out to Vladimir Putin's public either. So this is going to be a complicated question. And Biden is, in a way, putting the United States in a very interesting position. And I do hope that this has been thought through, because by identifying some 16 areas that he told Putin that we consider that cannot be hacked, he's basically saying, if that happens, I'm going to do something about it. So he has actually sort of set up a situation, what he called red lines, that that could have an issue. So it's an interesting problem for the next to watch what happens in the next few months.
What does our intelligence say? You've probably read more about this than I have, or know more. Is this gangs in Russia doing this, or is it the Russian government doing it? Do these gangs have the sponsorship of the Russian government, or is it just gangs acting on their own that are really good at computers, and the Russian government has nothing to do with it?
Well, this is where it gets complicated, because in some cases, this might be gangs who have bought off various parts of the Russian government. But the Putin system is a very corrupt one. That's how Putin maintains his power, is that he has a number of the oligarchs who are indebted to him And some of them then are people who can be bought off and then provide protection. It is like a large mob operation, akin more to The Sopranos than to a modern state. And in that sense, I think what you've got is a situation where it's not always easy to make the distinctions we want to make between state acting and private acting. Now, on the elections, it's believed that this was really orchestrated by the Russian government, that this was an actual campaign to play on American divisions and to interfere with our elections directly, in that sense at the time, to benefit Donald Trump, as seen as a disruptive candidate. And so in 2016 and even in 2020, these are seen as things that were done by the Russian state.
Okay, let's go back to the phones. Let's go to Taylor. Hello, Taylor.
Ben?
Yes, sir.
Professor, good evening to both of you. I always enjoy the professor's appearances, and I would agree with him on his very first statements tonight on this big deal conference. I watched the entire thing, and I want to hit on a couple of points. One is we'll just have to take the president's word that what he indicated he had made clear to Putin was in fact what he stated. But during his news conference, these news conferences are one of the most pathetic things about this entire presidency. He's got these index cards with the name and bullet points of the people he's going to call on. Putin today took over 20 questions from both American and foreign press. The president only took 7 questions from strictly U.S. press. Each question, he would make a few comments, but then he would bumble on about American values that he was preaching to Putin, as if though Putin didn't know what American values were. And it continued on that same thing on just about every question. And that's just sad.
Do you feel like he didn't answer the questions and he wasn't really putting himself out there? Is that what you feel like?
Well, he semi-answered the questions. He made a fair attempt to, but in order to make it sound like he knew what he was doing, he would continue on and be off the subject, and it was just sad. But now, one other thing. There's been a lot of criticism of Trump, but I'd like to say these two things. Trump at least put some serious sanctions on Russia, and he stopped a pipeline that was going from Russia to Germany, to cut that off, and was in hopes of selling U.S. energy to Germany. Well, President Biden has already overrode both of those things, and now Germany will have a tie into Russia that is really too sad. So those are the points I'd like to make, and I think the whole thing was overpressed, overhyped, and turned out to be actually semi-worthless.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Taylor, thank you. All right, a lot to talk about there, but I want to ask about sanctions and who is tougher on Russia, because we hear from both political parties that the other guy is not as tough as he should be. Where is the truth here? Where are we with sanctions on Russia? How tough were we under President Trump? What would you say?
Well, Trump was surprisingly tough on Russia on sanctions. I mean, he had this bizarre degree of affection for Putin, but the actual sanctions were pretty tough, and the pipeline particularly. The caller's correct. Trump was trying to prevent that pipeline with the argument that Germany should not be dependent on Russian energy supplies, and that this was harmful also to Eastern Europe. And the Biden administration decided, I think, to go with Germany on this. Germany wanted the pipeline completed, and Germany, I think, is part of Biden's strategy. He wants to get more support from Germany for things he wants to do also with China as well as with Russia. And so he was willing to lift the sanctions on the pipeline, which certainly did, in that sense, give Putin a victory. So, but again, this is part of at least Biden's strategy, was to bring Germany on board for other things. So there is a strategy there, but the result was to give Putin at least a concession on that. Biden did implement a number of personal sanctions on people directly connected to the earlier hack on American government systems that took place right at the end of the Trump administration. And so he did enact some sanctions there. The question of who's tougher is still to be seen. I mean, Biden, the Trump administration, for example, did provide lethal aid to the Ukrainians in a way that the Obama-Biden administration had been unwilling to do. So it'd be interesting to see whether Biden maintained some of the tougher policies on Russia that the Trump administration did outside of the rhetoric of Trump, which was a very different tone than what Biden's has been.
And we already talked a little bit about the press conference, how there weren't, they weren't side by side. They were separate. Taylor has other criticisms of the press conference. Is there anything that stands out to you? Certainly there's what Taylor said, but anything and how these were constructed or the questions or anything else about these press conferences?
Well, the interesting thing is Biden did have a rather choreographed press conference of taking only certain questions. He actually got annoyed at one questioner who was a bit more persistent. But the thing is, Putin did take a lot more questions, but Putin got off on all sorts of things and basically simply denied and essentially lied about a number of issues. He was very reluctant to deal directly with the issues like Alexander Navalny or the opposition within Russia. Putin's very smooth, but he's also, the American reporters who might have given him a tough time were at a disadvantage because of the translation and the opportunity to have any real follow-ups. Putin's not used to being really contradicted or being strongly questioned by reporters. They don't do that in Russia, or they don't do it very long, or they don't do it because they would be out of a job, or even worse. So in that sense, Putin did come across probably as more authoritative because he could get away with it. Biden is not terrifically comfortable, it seems, with the press conference arrangement. If one remembers even his first press conference that he hasn't had many. Trump loved his press conference partly because he would attack media and he used it as a forum there. But Biden does not seem as comfortable with it, and he did take a more restricted role. And he got his points across, but he did filibuster a bit, and I think that's a consequence of his Senate training. He does love to talk, and if he gets the opportunity to take a question further than he wants, he will do that.
Very interesting. Okay. All right, we're going to take a break. Betty and Josh, hold on. We will take your call. And if you want to call in, there's the number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.